President Trump announcing his decision in a letter to Kim Jong Un, citing, quote, tremendous anger and open hostility in recent comments from the North.
Well, many things can happen, and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially. I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world.
This comes a few hours after the regime said it destroyed its nuclear test site, yet that's something experts believe was already unusable after a major earthquake last year. We have Fox team coverage. Greg Palcott is in Seoul, but we begin with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts. Busy day over there, John.
Oh, yeah, unlike other days here, Dana. Good afternoon to you. The president canceled the summit after the deputy foreign minister of North Korea, Cho Sun-hui, issued what White House officials said was a tantamount to a threat of nuclear war if the talks didn't go very well between the president, the White House believing that that's not the most productive position that North Korea could have taken ahead of the planned summit. So the president this morning sent a letter to Kim Jong Un to say, much as we would like to do it, it's off, though he did give him something to back into if he wanted to come back to the table. Cho also insulted the vice president, Mike Pence, calling him politically dumb, saying that recent statements from the vice president were, quote, stupid. But the White House says they hear that from North Korea all the time. That's not the reason why they canceled the summit. It was the nuclear threat that forced the president to pull the trigger. In his letter to Kim and in person in the Roosevelt Room a short time ago, the president alternately praised North Korea's leader, threatened him with nuclear destruction, and invited him to keep moving toward the table. Listen here.
I hope that we'll continue onward. We'll see. But we are in a very strong position. I think they want to do what's right. I really think that they want to do, and it was only recently that this has been taking place, and I think I understand why it's been taking place. But they want to do what's right. I really believe Kim Jong Un wants to do what's right. So hopefully things will work out.
You heard the president say there, I think I know what's taking place, and that is to change North Korea's attitude. The president was asked there in the Roosevelt Room about that. He said, well, I'm not going to say. But earlier this week, Tuesday, in the Oval Office, the president suggested that Kim's attitude changed after a second meeting that Kim had with Chinese President Xi Jinping in the port city of Dalian. The president suggesting that Xi might have gotten in his ear and said, look, I'm not sure you want to do this summit thing. And that's when he thinks that North Korean attitudes changed. North Korea has also been radio silent in any entreaties that were coming from the State Department about setting up the summit. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, on Capitol Hill earlier today and pushing back on the suggestion that the president canceled the summit because the White House wasn't ready for it. Listen here.
Over the past many days, we have endeavored to do what Chairman Kim and I had agreed was to put preparation teams together to begin to work to prepare for the summit. And we had received no response to our inquiries from them. So we, in addition to what the president laid out in his letter, it is also the case that I disagree with what you said in your opening statement. I think the American team's fully prepared. I think we're rocking. I think we're ready.
Where this goes from here likely depends on what Kim's reaction to the letter will be. It was about 10 o'clock at night Pyongyang time when the president transmitted it to him, so likely we won't hear anything from North Korea until later on today morning their time. If it's the typical North Korean knee-jerk reaction, Dana, a summit may never happen. But if Kim Jong Un considers that what the president's really saying here is you're not getting good information from Xi Jinping, it's much more in your interest to side with the United States than it is to side with China, well, maybe, just maybe, we'll hear something different from him.
All right, John, diplomacy is certainly tricky and never necessarily a straight line. Thank you so much for that.
You bet.
So the announcement of the canceled summit came hours after North Korea said it demolished its main nuclear site, something many believe was just for show because no international regulators were there. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is in Seoul, South Korea. Greg.
Hey, Dana, we'll get to that event in a moment, but it is indeed late here in Seoul. We are now getting reaction from the South Korean government to the events of the past couple hours. South Korean President Moon Jae-in in special session with his national security staff urging direct talks between President Trump and Kim Jong Un, saying, I'm quoting here, denuclearization cannot be delayed or abandoned. The president here seemed to be a bit blindsided by events. He was, quote, quite perplexed by the statement coming from President Trump. He called it regrettable. Now, President Trump said that he spoke by phone with South Korean President Moon, including about military readiness in the region. That has got to be a bit of a blow to the South Korean. He's been working for months to get a diplomatic resolution of this crisis, including his own summit last month with Kim Jong Un along the DMZ. Again, the White House summit cancellation seems to stem from that statement coming from the Kim Jong Un regime, especially the reference to a quote-unquote Libya model option regarding North Korea. From our experience here, Pyongyang takes that phrase to mean regime change and hates it. Also getting the White House angry, that threat to go nuclear to nuclear in a showdown between the two countries. Understand also that President Trump spoke with Japanese President Abe, a firm ally in the region. And yes, now on to that event to the northeast of where we are. Ironically, this was supposed to be a day when the region moved closer to peace. North Korea claiming on Thursday it completely dismantled its nuclear test site up in the northeast corner of the country. Now, while foreign reporters were at the scene, they said there was an explosive closure of the tunnels there. There were no international experts confirming what was said. This was largely seen as a PR gesture in advance of that planned summit. Now, that summit for the moment is not to be. And yes, it is late here, Dana. We have not gotten any kind of reaction from North Korea. They have been better at reacting now than they have in the past. We might hear something on Friday. We will see. Back to you.
All right. And of course, then we'll be coming right back to you, Greg. Thank you. So to help us break it all down, Jamil Jaffer is a former senior advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations and House Intelligence Committees. Glad to have you here today. It had been a little disorienting to all of a sudden have Kim Jong Un be so cordial, and you know he did release the American hostages, and it looked like we were full steam ahead. What do you know about the China angle here, and also is it somewhat a little bit more comforting when you realize that, oh, this is the Kim Jong Un family that we know, and we have respect for the process, for the summit, but we're not going to go there and be snookered?
Well, that's right, Dana. Look, I mean, China obviously is the big player in the region. They are ultimately the backer of the North Korean regime. Without China, there is nothing for North Korea. They don't have any support. And so they're inclined to go where China tells them to go. And so it's interesting that his aggressive statements came after meeting with the Chinese leader. Not clear whether he asked the Chinese leader, look, I want to get a little more aggressive, or China said, maybe you need to be a little more aggressive. Either way, what you're seeing here, I think, is two leaders sort of, going toe-to-toe and saying, I can cancel, you can cancel, I can talk about nuclear war, so can you. And at the end of the day, while the tensions have heated up a little bit and the president cancels the summit, I bet you it's back on within 2 weeks.
Well, that's interesting. And the president did leave the door open, certainly, for that. One thing about China that I'm curious about, every actor here that is involved, China, Japan, South Korea, the United States, and certainly North Korea, they're acting in their country's best interest. I don't understand, and maybe you could help me understand, why is it in China's interest for this summit not to go forward?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, what's in China's interest is to have a North Korea that comes back into line and does the right thing here, but also a North Korea that is strong relative to South Korea, right? Because at the end of the day, what they see is, they sort of view this in Cold War terms, right? The U.S. has its sphere of influence, South Korea. The China has its sphere of influence with North Korea, and they need to balance it off. And so if it looks like President Trump has got the upper hand, China say, look, we want you to back off a little bit. And actually, North Korea feels the same way. And so not clear whether this is China pulling the strings or whether it's North Korea reacting and saying to China, we want to go ahead and do this way. And China said, yep, that sounds fine to us.
Well, of course, anything the president does comes with some criticism from some parts of the country. Richard Haass, who we all know from foreign policy circles, he tweeted today, the summit was bound to fail as real Donald Trump administration badly overestimated what North Korea would agree to. The issue was and is U.S. willingness to accept an outcome short of total denuclearization. All or nothing foreign policy with North Korea, Iran, China. Trade risks producing nothing or conflict. But I wondered what you thought about this. I mean, you were obviously very instrumental in helping guide, at least on the Republican side, the members of Congress as President Obama moved forward on the Iran deal. And what sort of parallels do you see here?
Well, look, I mean, you can always talk about half measures. If you want a foreign policy of half measures, then that's fine. If you want incrementalism, that's fine. Clearly, Donald Trump is going for a big prize here. I mean, that comes at some cost. And so, look, everyone was sort of amazed that Donald Trump could pull off a big meeting like this. I think the meeting will still happen in the long run, but it's going to happen on America's terms. And I think that's actually the right way to negotiate. If it looks like we want it too much, like we did in the Iran deal, they'll continue to string you out and get a variety of concessions. And that's exactly what happened to Obama. And President Trump is saying that's not going to happen to me here.
Isn't the big issue here just what denuclearization means? I mean, Kim Jong Un thinks that he's in a much stronger position because he now has the weapons. And we are saying, no, you're going to have to give up the weapons if you want all the other things that the president has said could be good for your country. The definition of denuclearization, that's the real key here.
You're exactly right, Dana. That is exactly the key. And the challenge here is that Donald Trump might even have a different view of what denuclearization means, right? I think that obviously the U.S. position on that has long been no nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, out completely. And Kim Jong Un might agree to that, but what he may mean is, well, I'll denuclearize when you denuclearize, which of course is an unsustainable scenario. And so we'll see what ends up being meant here. But that's part of why you want to get to a place where your diplomats are talking to one another and you have an understanding of the terms before you go into these negotiations.
Well, one thing that is very different is that before this whole process, before Mike Pompeo, the new Secretary of State, had gone over to North Korea, had actually met with him, we didn't have any sort of relationship. So that is different. And I think that you're right. It probably will take place at some point, maybe just not in 2 weeks. All right, Jamil, thank you.
Thanks, Dana.